I'm Mitch Wright. I'm a principal systems engineer at Walmart. This is my second time at Puppet Conference and my first time presenting. I was actually on the Puppetize virtual thing that happened last year, so I don't know if that counts or not. But so we'll go with it from there. If you've seen the previous talks of my colleagues, Marty Jackson and Derek Robinson, you'll know that at Walmart we operate at a massive scale. And when you operate at the massive scale that we do, you need robust testing. And in this talk, I'm going to share with you how we approach testing at Walmart. I've been with Walmart IT for 26 years. I began my career in the field support area. It used to be called that. I think it's called the field services area now. In the dark ages of Unix administration, I moved up. Over the years, I had various administration responsibilities, from racking and stacking Unix hardware. It was Unix back in the day with the big R registered trademark kind of thing, to doing power systems and AIX, to setting up Windows systems, provisioning, whatever we had to do, did SAN, kernel configurations, and all those kind of things. A couple of years ago, I was invited to join the configuration management team at Walmart, the Puppet team. That was a pretty cool thing, I thought. The leadership wanted me to help drive the adoption of the compute infrastructure of Puppet across the areas. It wanted me to help drive that. And today, my main responsibility is setting up the pipelines and the testing framework for Puppet modules. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Now, when I first started on the configuration management team, I was a sysadmin, and I was new to Puppet and Git. And to me, being sysadmin, repos were ISOs that you pointed your iPixie to and things like that and built your servers. I didn't understand what software repositories were, or Git, or code revisions, or branching. I learned. People taught me. It showed me how things would work. Went to Puppet classes and Puppet training. I started to create plans. I started to push code. And a question kept nagging me, because I was an engineer, right? How could I know that these Puppet plans are going to do what I think they're going to do? How are they validated? I started to dig in. I learned about Jenkins workflows, discovered Ruby, discovered unit testing, and I was able to mock up one of my teammates' unit test and RSpec test, and I put my stuff with it, and I made it work. And long story short, my manager, he asked me to be the CI/CD lead. I accepted the challenge. I really didn't know what CI/CD meant that day. I actually had to go Google it, and I actually asked Jody Sellers what that meant that day. Yeah. He's laughing because we all know who Jody is. He has a nickname called Yoda. So after taking on the role, being the engineer that I was, I analyzed what we needed to do. We came to the realization that we needed to mature our infrastructure testing, and with the eventual goal that we're going to move to CD for PE. And I was tasked with working out the details and the design to get us there. And we basically identified 3 milestones, and while we're only halfway there, we've learned a lot about how we can make a better framework for testing. One of them is we want to provide a robust framework for testing the Puppet code. Working on that. We want to give the devs the tools to check the code for errors and help them correct their errors. Because, you know, and I like that term that they brought up today, was infrastructure developers. I thought that was a good term because that's what we're becoming. Help them correct their errors before they push their branch into the unstable and dev, and it's kind of like, oh, now everybody saw I was an idiot and I didn't do the resource types right? You don't want to see that in the test. So, and the last thing was, we want to automatically check the Puppet code and deploy it cleanly everywhere and all the time. And that's a mantra that we have at Walmart. That's one of our key principles. Because if we have an error that happens once in a million, what is it, like every 3 minutes? It's going to happen. So we want to make sure that we don't have errors. That's always been a thing with us. So, got to doing some research. I wanted to see what the experts in the field thought about what was going on with testing and CI/CD and understanding. And I stumbled across a puppet talk by Renee Last and Dimitri T. I can't pronounce his last name, Tzinko, I believe. It was called Delivering Premium Quality Modules Using Beaker and VM Puller for Multi-Platform Testing. And I went crazy. I think I texted Marty and I said, what's VM Puller? What's Beaker? What is this thing? I'm going to do this. I want to put this together. I mean, I was jumping around. It was great. And so I started going for it. And he's like, are you sure? Are you sure? You know, it's kind of like he was like double checking, making sure I was sane. But we did. I got most of that working, and we're about ready to go. So I thank those guys so much. That's a great thing, and it really helped us to start getting down the path of CI/CD in our new thing. But let me back up a little bit, because we want to talk about how we do testing at Walmart, what our test flow looks like. We use Jira to plan in an agile method. We use Confluence to document, and it depends on what we're trying to do. With the planning situation, with the sprint, if we're doing a sprint or a Kanban, if it's research, trying to figure something out, we'll just Kanban it. If it's straightforward like code, Git, push, PR, merge, blah, we'll sprint. It's not exact, and we course correct. We just try to keep moving towards our goals. That's what we do. We code. We recently started using VS Code. It's got some neat connections, and it also has some backing from Puppet and integration with the PDK. It's really helpful, so when you're coding, you can see where the warnings happen and all those other things that make your code clean. So before you do an actual push or any kind of thing like that, or even before you do a PDK validate, you can actually see what your code's going to do. VS Code also has some plugins for Git, so you can kind of see where you are when you did your last merge, when you did your last push. It's helpful with the developers when they do that. I've written a user snippet that allows for testing when you're writing a unit test or an acceptance test, so that you can just start and then tab, and you can put in all the fields for your unit test or your spec test, so that those things are kind of cumbersome sometimes with the spacing and what you have to do with the contains and all those kind of things. So I wrote one of those. Now that's not to say that we're not going to turn anybody away that's doing Atom or some other IDE or using Vi or Emacs or something like that. We're fine with that. But if they ask, we're going to use VS Code. We're going to say VS Code. We version control. We keep our Puppet modules in a GitHub repository. And it's a GitHub repository that's marked private. I don't know, anybody else have a GitHub repository marked private? It's fun, isn't it? Good times. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, how we had to rearrange some of the unit tests. We test, and currently that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. We've created an ecosystem that validates our Puppet code. We use the standard testing tools to validate Puppet lint, syntax, parser, RSpec, and we validate our control repos. We do the R10K validation checks on it, the Puppet file and the higher data. And before we go forward with the PR process with the R10K Puppet file and higher data, thanks to Music here, just shout out to him, we're opening and closing change control through ServiceNow every time. So it's like it processes through. So that's kind of how some of the numbers came out. If you saw Marty's talk, he used some of those numbers because we're opening and closing a change every time. What we want to get to, we want to move to using a PDK validate, and I'll explain that a little bit about why I want to do that, to do the test units and stuff like that. We also want to move to CD for P, and we have made some incredible progress here in the last month, thanks to Mr. Blake right there. He has helped us out. His enthusiasm has been contagious in helping us. And we're working with the product team, Carl's team, to do the transition kind of thing. So we're also looking at how we can use Litmus to simulate our module deployment and to validate that what we change gets changed and why and where. And had a little talk with TP about that the other day. And last but not least, we want to use something with once-over impact analysis. I think they made an announcement this morning about that. We're really interested in doing that because, I mean, y'all know that before you hit that big red button, I mean, that's a real, especially when you got 100,000 nodes and Marty staring at you. You know, he sits right there. Y'all don't get to see that look. I mean, he doesn't say much. He just kind of gives you the look. And every now and then you'll get a text message or a Slack going, Mitch. I'll say, I didn't do it. I'll help. I didn't break it, but I'll help fix it. So we want to be able to give when you're doing that impact analysis, like that was great what Carl's been doing. We've been working with him a little bit. And we did a POC with that. And you could see, oh my gosh, what's going to change? You know, on what systems it's going to change and how it's going to change. That's just going to be tremendous for that developer to be able to say with confidence, this is what I wanted to change and this is what I changed. That's just, to me, that's where we need to be. We're trying to get there. We deploy our code. We use an in-house orchestrator tool called Concord. It's open sourced, I believe, and y'all can check it out. We use that until we get to CD for PE. We use it to test, build, and deploy our Puppet code. And it's got some connections with ServiceNow and some other tools that we have internally. And last but not least, we monitor our Puppet. We have Puppet Enterprise, Puppet DB, and Grafana, and we make sure so when we hit the button to say go, we make sure that things don't get out of sorts too bad. I mean, we know something's going to change, and we watch it, and then it goes back down. If it doesn't do that back down thing, we call Blake, and Blake gets in there, and he fixes it. So, I love me some Blake. So, how has our testing evolved? Well, in order to keep it within specifications, we went and looked around and see what we had was good and what we had was bad. This is some historical kind of thing that we got out of Marty, was like when we originally did testing, the devs were hand rolling their own testing environment. And so basically we found things like, you know, the gem files would be over here. I mean, this gem file looks like this, and this gem file looks like that, and that rake file looks like this. And it's just like, oh my gosh, what is the standard supposed to be? Tried to do a little bit of that, you know, and just broke things, you know. It's like, oh, go back the other way, you know. It's like, so we couldn't figure out a standard. We couldn't get them standardized. The metadata JSON files is another example. I mean, they would be missing for the most part. And if they weren't missing, they had strange things in there, which didn't make any sense. So, and our windows, we couldn't even do any real tests with them because we couldn't use the same framework. The other funny thing was in the unit test, it would sometimes, there were some good ones out there. Jeremy had done some really good work, and so had Darren, and so had Ryan. And they would test the things that need to be tested. Like there's things, I mean, you can't let NTP and time and stuff like that. So there's some really good modules for that. But other ones, I got in there looking around, and it would just catalog and compile. That was it. And then some had just like an exit 0 in there. And so it would show up on the reports as being passing, but it wasn't doing really anything. So anyhow, so what we're trying to move toward is a PDK type environment. Trying to get tests to run in containers, Windows to run the same kind of tests, the same pipelines, and we're trying to standardize our tests. But when we talk about standardizing testing, like I said, it's like that is such an overwhelming effort. I don't know if anybody's worked at any kind of effort to keep many modules up to date. It's just overwhelming. Marty would always tell me it's like I'm Hercules, was that it? Pushing up that big boulder up the hill, and then it would come back down on me and stuff like that. That's what it felt like some days. So we heard about this PDK thing, And we thought, well, maybe that would help because we can't figure out how to get anything standardized. And we got to looking at it, and it was like it forces you into some standard ways of code, helps you with some better module validations, like I said, with VS Code, has some baked-in syntax checking, linting, and those kind of things, and PDK validate's pretty easy to run on the command line. You don't have to tell everybody, okay, get your Ruby this way, and get your Puppet like this way, and get your gem files this way, and it's like, devs were confused on how to do a lot of that, so they don't even test. So that's kind of where we were. So we thought we needed to move towards PDK. So, but I was still kind of concerned because, you break the pipelines, you break the pipelines, then nothing rolls forward, and people call you up and say, hey, the pipelines aren't working, I'm getting all these failures in the test and all that kind of stuff. So we decided to go about making changes in a metered approach. And so I said, okay, we have this one module, it's pretty good. It's called software repos. I branched it, and I said, okay, I'm gonna do a PDK convert. So I did a PDK convert. And that scene, it reminded me of the scene in Star Wars, like where Luke hears Obi-Wan Kenobi saying something to him, he's off over here. I'm gonna set the stage. I have a friend named Ben Briard. Now, I made the PDK convert, and it didn't work like I wanted to, and I got mad. I was like, dadgummit, this stupid thing, Puppet Labs, doesn't work. And I could hear Ben Briard in the back of my head going, Mitch, read the manual. He would always tell me that. So I read the manual. And I want to give a shout out to Puppet Labs, Puppet documentation people, whoever that is. Y'all do some great documentation, and I should have read it before I did the PDK convert. And I apologize. I didn't tweet out that y'all suck. I just said it underneath my breath when I said that. So I dug into the PDK ecosystem, and I learned about the sync YAML. I learned about the local YAML files that PDK accounted for, and the control systems, and all those conversions and updates and kind of stuff. And we decided to use the PDK template. And the PDK template is just a standard, basically is what it is. And we forked the template into an internal repo that we had, and we added some of the things to just, in the config defaults YAML file, like we don't use Travis and AppBear, so we made sure that those don't get sent over to the system when you run the conversion with this. And we added like proxy to the rake file, and we had global default facts that we need for the modules to be tested correctly. And we also have local HIRA data internal to the modules. And so we want to make sure that the HIRA config file is in place in the spec.helper file. So we made sure all that. So we got those things taken care of. Everything was kosher, do a PDK convert, and we pointed over to the internal template, and things were smooth. We had one thing left. We had an array of default facts that were within the spec helper file, and we needed to pull those out, set those over into the default local facts YAML file. That's where it's supposed to go, not inside the spec helper file. So wrote some scripts, got that moved over, and tested and retested and tested and retested. And a little paranoid, I was afraid it was going to break everything. But hey, we got them all moved over. We did 5 or 10 at a time. And it was various things would happen. I opened up like 45 to 60 tickets of, we got to go forward, but then it's kind of like, we got to fix some of these things I was finding within, changing all the things out there. So what's left? In addition to fixing all those tickets, we need to correct our in-house container. We need to incorporate PDK, basically changing the Docker file for the container to be built with PDK. Or I'm thinking we might use the Puppet Labs PDK, or I don't know, got to think about that. That's kind of what's left. We need to change our in-house tests to use PDK commands. I said that before. And we need to take our control repos to the next level. Impact analysis, I think we talked about that this morning. OnceOver is the tool, I think, that uses that on the back end. Dylan Radcliffe said that's the way to go. He likes it, and That's going to be good. Now, a pet peeve of mine I think we need to fix, and I'm going to make sure that we get this done, is that alphabetically put your hybrid data and puppet file in order. I can't stand it when they're unalphabetized. Ask Blake, I will stop that. So yeah, I want to programmatically check that so it's not Mitch saying that, you know, you're unalphabetized and no, you can't go forward. I want to have the check that says, hey, you need to alphabetize this before you can go forward. So just to be more friendly about that kind of thing, so it doesn't come across as on high doing that. This is kind of a how it changes if you do the conversion with the PDK template and the PDK convert. And it depends on your environment, what you have. Like, it added the Rubocop YAML file. If you all haven't played with Rubocop, it's a lot of fun. And this one, it added the metadata JSON file. It wasn't one. Fantastic, right? For all y'all test people, y'all know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so it changes things. In the red, you can see where it deleted it or added or to it or something like that. Puppet lint, RC. The PDK template really is the way to go. So if you're doing the PDK conversions, that was good times there. So I talked about how we do, we have internal security measures. I mean, I know all y'all, we have security, and we understand why. We know that, you know, we gotta have protection of our company's data and our customers' data, and we provide safeguards. The security team gives us gates inside and outside, and so we just we respect that, and we understand why we have to do that. And so I've kind of grouped it into two different gotchas, kind of, so to speak. Being that if it's external, what we found is that a lot of times we've already internally mirrored that, whatever we're trying to do, whether it's something with a gem or a container of some sort that's maybe on Docker Hub, we've mirrored it internally. Or if it's an RPM or something like that, we probably have it mirrored internally. So we just work with whoever the developer is or whoever the product owner is and figure out how we write the configuration so that when we kick off the test, it points internally rather than externally. Now, there's other situations where we've done the security review, like the Forge, and we point it out to the Forge, and that's where we pull it from. So it just depends on the situation. Now, the other way is, like we have, is a internal GitHub repository that is private. And when it is private, you have to have the token to go pull. So when you run your RSpec test, your unit test, it tries to pull the prerequisites. It has dependencies in the fixtures YAML file, so it tries to pull those. And what you have to do is secretly and securely put in the token so that it doesn't show up in the logs, so everybody can see your token, right? You don't want that. So you want to put it in there secretly and privately into the fixtures YAML file, and then pull it in and then run the test. Now you have to do that for both the unit test and for the acceptance test, but you got to get that information in there, and then it runs the test against the module. So that's kind of the way I've got that worked out. Good times. Now, we've made a lot of progress. This has been our roadmap, so to speak. But with long-term projects, you know, the last mile always feels like the longest. And we are trying to change I guess you would call the way we speak about testing and production issues. And we want to be able to show, and I think impact analysis will be a big help with that, but visually show to leadership how your testing is working and overlay that somehow or another with production issues and be able to visually give that to leadership and saying, listen, if we were to spend the resources in testing and in setting up the test and getting better test for the code before it went in production, we wouldn't have so much operational cost. Just don't know how to visually show that, but that's kind of like, that's one of my next kind of like, I don't know how we do this. I've got Monica kind of looking at some of the things. She's in Sunnyvale. She's helping me out with that, but trying to look and see how we could do that. That just is one of my next things. I really want to get a handle on how we can do that, how we can show that story kind of thing, and how we can add value to that. So, last thing, testing. It's all about change. And our testing environment is set up so that the developers can make changes and the risk that they have is minimalized. And it's all about your thoughts and attitude about how you approach changes. Now, sometimes the changes are really large. Like we changed out, what was that? The mono to split to mono kind of thing. It was a huge change. And there was plans made, there was back out procedures, there was expectations and how we did that. Sometimes there's changes that can cause stress. Like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work. But then sometimes there's changes that can cause relief from that stress, right? Because that last change was bad. It depends on your attitude, and that's what we want to talk about is your attitude about change. For me, change from going from one team to the other, it can take you out of your comfort zone. But it can help you grow as an engineer, so be positive about that. It can be a good thing. And we've chosen at Walmart to make sure that we're changing, always changing. I think Marty said that. If you're stopped, you're dead or something like that. Can't remember what he said. We've chosen to change at Walmart. And that's in our DNA. That's just how we work. That's what we want to do. I don't realize, I was telling Marty before, I don't realize the changes we make every day. I don't think that cadence is too much. It's because I'm used to it. It's because that's how I came up through Walmart. I mean, started out as a young guy, and now I'm old, and I've always been at that cadence, So it's just the way we are. Mr. Sam was always wanting us to get out in front of the changes, take the risk to improve, and be the best. Customer excellence is where we have to be. I just want to say thank you. I was given a great car to drive. There were some guys, Ryan and Jeremy, Marty and Darren, they guided me. Thank you so much. Is there any questions? Sure.
So I'm curious why you forked the template for PDK. In my experience, I've seen that at least with the latest versions of PDK, anything you need to change seems to fit in the single template.
I maybe missed the PDK template. So the template I forked. It's a different repository. And I forked that one because I wanted to be able to, because there's some things in those ERBs that if we can't put those into our environment, so I forked it internally and then I pull it from the internal. The other thing is it keeps down the traffic from when we're going up to the forge and stuff like that. So I kind of just made that decision because we wanted to have our config defaults YAML file being what we wanted to do as far as Walmart customized kind of things. What was the other thing? There was another reason I did that. It overwrote some of the changes that we wanted to have in place. I kept fighting with it, so I was just like, okay, I'll just make my own. And then sync YAML will do the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's the other piece. The sync YAML file also does.
Fight a lot less with recent versions.
Does it?
From what I've
No, this was back, I haven't looked at it since July or so it may have been improved since then. It seems like they've gotten better about those kind of things. So yeah, that's kind of what we did. And that helps us so that when we run updates, it knows where to point to and keeps everything in check and things like that. We've not had too many conflicts with the upstream, so it's been fine. So yeah. Yes. William, I think.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. What framework are you using for acceptance testing, and what has been your experience with it so far?
Well, I started out with Beaker after I saw the video and stuff like that, and then ran into a couple of business kind of situations in our environment. I actually built a VM puller. We have an on-site VM puller. And so we started using the Beaker, but then we heard that Litmus was the way to go. So we kind of want to get in front of that. So we started using litmus, and I've been working with TP Honey to get some of those things that we found in our enterprise environment that were a little different from what he had initially planned on doing with that. So we've kind of been talking with him about that, but a litmus is what we've kind of been going with.
So, like server spec?
Yeah, server spec.
Okay.
Yeah, we write the test in server spec. Yeah, the contains and those kind of things, and yeah, that's all server spec. Yeah, serverspec.org. Yeah, go to that. It has all the resource types. It's straightforward. Yeah, that's what I did with that user snippet, the Heaven VS Code. That's all based upon the things that server spec does as far as that. So. No questions? Do we wait 13 seconds, I heard? So. Yes, sir.
How do y'all utilize game cooler specifically?
To get a system to test, a unit test, we take it, I actually wrote a Puppet manifest so that we could create all our different varieties that we have for test. Like we have SUSEs and I think Ubuntu's and all those different varieties. So we that's what we do is we use it for that because we have so many different things in the stores and distribution centers and home offices. And we're trying to work it out to get a template built for Windows. That's the last thing we started working on. Actually, that was last week, wasn't it, Blake? So yeah,
You
yeah.
use a handful of each or just like one of each?
Right now we have 5 in the pool. I'm not really sure exactly how many we're going to need when we go full bore, but mainly we're going to use it in the PR process when someone does a PR to master. I'm not going to try to do it because we have 3 main branches. People go into unstable, and that's where they kind of play, make sure everything works out okay, and then they go to dev, and that's where if you do something wrong in there, people will beat you up, the rest of the community, and master. When it makes the tag, that's when we want to make sure that we do an acceptance test before we allow that to happen. So that's what our plan is for that. So, thank y'all for coming. Have a good afternoon.